Welcome to the Kendall Report, where I share my 43 years of experience to help you manage your portfolios and protect your wealth. Remember to subscribe, like, and share these videos. In tonight's video, we're going to discuss a number of things concerning what's going on in the economy and a long-term outlook. I will be presenting the differences on how I view the world versus others, and this will be really important to understand if you're new to this channel. Let's get into tonight's video. Couple of things I want to discuss before we get into market analysis and expectations for the rest of the week. I do want to talk about some of the things that I do in this channel that I think are very different. You need to understand to fully interpret my analysis that I deliver every night. One of the things that I have that are different, there's a lot of ways to look at the markets from the standpoint of analysis of indices and other types of things, which is what most people do. They assume that the index is doing something, that means something will happen with all stocks in the market, which isn't true at all. In fact, the basis of index analysis is highly biased just due to the weighting of the individual indexes themselves. Some are cap weighted, some have other factors that determine the weighting, but they all have a bias built in. So one of the things that makes this channel unique, I am a software developer and analyst and trader, and what I've done, I created a database off of the models that I have used for decades to manage billions of dollars. And a lot of you that watch this channel already know this about me, but a lot of folks are coming in that are new that don't understand what I'm doing. So I make analysis of 16,000 symbols in our database, which gives me a better insight into how many symbols are actually trending, not how the indexes are acting. This gives me a very unique view of how the world works, and I think this will help you to understand even more. As you know, I cover the Wavetech database every night, and it's very unique in what it said. If you look back on what I've been telling you for the last couple of months, it is in a bottoming pattern. I looked at some of the stats that I put out back on October 14th. I did a video that said, is this a bottom? It's starting to become very obvious that maybe we are in a bottoming phase. As we go forward, it's going to get more dynamic because the intermediate database will start to come into play, and there's other elements that I'll be looking at. I will go into much more detail in tonight's overview of the database. Hey folks, just a quick announcement before I get into tonight. This is going to be another abbreviated video. I'm really sorry, just having a hard time getting through some of this stuff. I'm still not 100%, but I want to continue to move toward getting back to full production. I'm going to tell you that probably on Wednesday night, I'll do a typical live stream at 9 p.m. Eastern time. So we'll go there and just see how that works out and see if we can cover some more markets. Producing these videos have become a little bit cumbersome right now. There's a number of issues are coming up and I just don't have the energy. So thank you again for being patient. Let's get into tonight's overview. As I'm looking at the database, we're at 77%. We did see a little bit of positive rotation. We saw about 250 odd buy signals, about 130 sell signals. So we're really just kind of rotating here and maintaining at a very high level. And one of the things that I was talking about in my opening comments is that it's really unique to look at the markets like this. So when we're looking at a 15,834 symbols, right now there's 12,231 symbols that have a uptrend on a short-term basis. We've convert this screen over to a weekly, and you'll see that now it's at 45.58%. And the point of all this is to show that there's 7,200 symbols that are been identified to be in a trend mode. And this is important to understand because this tells us that there's a material amount of symbols that are starting to trend And one of the things that happens as the markets continue to get some traction, you'll see here in a minute, I'm going to go through the intermediate and long-term all the way out to a quarterly chart just as a review. And then like I said, I'll do a live stream on Wednesday night. I'll cover all the markets that I normally cover. When we're looking at the database, what this tells us is that there's a substantial amount of traction in the markets. This is not a place where the markets are likely to reverse and go down. Stats page here, and what you'll see is that the average days long is about 39 days on an optimized daily. On a optimized weekly, it's 205 trading days. So that's the better part of a year. So once this traction comes in, very seldom does it just roll over. This is important to understand because what I have here is decades of understanding of how the database works, how it reacts in different situations, and been through everything going all the way back to the .com crash in 2000, 08, and all of the iterations that we've seen in between. And the database acts pretty consistently, especially after turnarounds. We saw the database get washed out really heavy last year to the point where we were only around under 10% on the weekly. So that's a full liquidation mode, and that is basically a complete reset. To see it come back to 45%, that is significant. Back in October, we saw the short-term database come up over 42%, and I started to talk about the potential for a bottom. So I'll go through the analysis on the S&P, and this will tie all this together. All right, as we get into the S&P, we'll start off with the short term, setting up expectations for tomorrow, and then I'll go through a higher level analysis as we go into daily, weekly, monthly, and all the way into quarterly, and that will complete the video for tonight. But we look at the hourly. As I mentioned last night, the algos were all pointing to the upside. We had a really nice rally throughout yesterday. The S&P was up 1.13%, NASDAQ was up 2.01%, and the Russell up 1.25%. The configuration on this chart, we saw basically a rally up, and overnight we've seen a very narrow range as we come into, as I bring the cursor over toward the open in the morning, we start to see some weakness start to come in where we're looking at PPM2 potentially still stable, but starting to show the weakness, or we could come down to the red line here, which is right now around 40.21. Last trade here right now is at 40.3950. So we could trade back in. There doesn't appear to be anything real material. The extreme that's likely right now would be a move back to 44.05. I'll go through the market grid here in just a minute to show you some of those expectations. Let's go ahead and take a look at the daily charts, and we're seeing some interesting configurations set up. And we did hit the fib target 1, 40.54. The high yesterday was 40.5675, so we printed right into this first Fibonacci target, and this looks like we could see a little bit of a sideways movement. The algos are suggesting another day of stability where we're likely to see the PPM stay in a stable mode, and then we'll start to see a little decrease. And all this is really telling us is that we're likely to come back towards the moving average, which right now is going up about 20 handles per day. It's currently at 39.88, so all of a sudden we'll be 40.10 and 40.20, 40.25 plus in the next couple of days. Overall, the stability across the board and what's being projected by the algos are really suggesting exactly this scenario that we're looking at. So let's start to go into some of the longer term outlooks here and just discuss what's going on. And I think this is really important to have in perspective as we come in to the first quarter of this year. And we're almost finished the first month already. It's hard to believe, especially since I was out of commission for most of the month. So it went by pretty fast for me. But let's take a look at a couple of things here. On the weekly chart, we're looking right now, 3 Fibonacci targets on the upside are starting to be generated, which is really interesting. 44.86, 47.25, 48.85. That would be printing into an all-time new high, or ATH, on this pattern. I don't see that happening, but I do see the potential for the market starting to come in around this range. If you notice some of the previous spots here, I'll circle around here, we've seen these type of projections before. We're looking at 41.68, 43.70 was a projection in the past. So now we had a 44.53, and now that has been adjusted to 44.66. So the 44 handle is starting to look very realistic. Now what's happening with the algos, it looks like a bit of consolidation will happen here, but overall, as we start to look into early February, we're starting to see, at least for the moment, the algos are suggesting that we're going to see some more upside. And I think you'll see here in a minute as we go through the monthly and the quarterly that this starts to validate that there's further upside going on. As I just talked about the database, it's very likely that the database will continue to get traction. Intermediate database gets over 62%. That's going to give us solid traction, underlying trend, and a lot of things will start to move much higher. So let's go ahead and take a real quick look at the monthly chart now. And as we look at that chart, you'll see something pretty interesting. I'm going to switch over from here so we can do the long term over to SPX here. So we have the cash so we can get the algos working. What's interesting about this is, as I talked about in last night's video, I talked about how a lot of these metrics are out there are at extreme lows when you're looking at the economic numbers out there. And from the standpoint of the monthly algos, when we look at SPX, all of a sudden you're seeing a massive acceleration where the 10-period moving average is being projected to start to turn up. So this is probably going to be the elements that will start printing up towards 42 handle, a potential 44 plus handle. As we go down the road, we'll figure this out a little better. On the PPM2, which is interesting, it's still slightly negative, and that's where the red line is here, and that number is 42.19. So that's probably our first resistance that we'll come up to. We should continue to move up towards this. Now, this is a monthly chart. We have a little bit over a week to go in the current month. So once that's done, we should start to see the market grid turn up here and other elements start to come into play that are going to suggest we're at least going to the 21 period, which is the 42.19 level. It's still down a little bit, so that's going to be around 41.86 to 42.20 level, just rough numbers right now. So now let's go to the big analysis, and let's go out to a quarterly chart, which I like to do at the beginning of each quarter. And what we're seeing here is interesting. While the algos and the PPMs are continuing to bleed off here, it suggests, or come into the second quarter, looks like it's going to happen. We're going to see a little bit of weakening of the PPMs across the board, but they're still very positive, which suggests that we're likely to say trade between the 21 and the 10. The 21 is currently 34.60, and the 10 period is 40.86. So we're trading right around those numbers right now. But this is going to continue on an upslope, and most likely what will happen is we could see the market grid turn slightly lower, or possibly form one of these box formations that I talk about that happens on the grid, which would suggest around the 44, 46 level would be the extremes for the month of February. But regardless of this, we still like those upward slope that is in place is going to continue. Now, what's interesting as we go through the year, we start to set up a pattern here that I think is somewhat interesting. So I'm going to go ahead and draw in a couple of things here. So this is my expectation from the standpoint of what's likely to happen. So we have this pattern set up here. We're likely to see maybe some sort of zigzag. The moving averages will continue to flow in these upward phase, and the markets will start to come, most likely from a market grid standpoint. We'll see the market grid probably start to do something like this, and markets will move within these patterns here. But it looks bullish on an intermediate term level, which it is likely for on a larger basis, on a quarter-to-quarter basis, to set up more of a consolidation. This could carry us all the way through Q2, Q3, and then we'll have to watch and see how we set up for the fourth quarter of 23. But for the moment, it looks like we're at least going to be stable. The database confirms that. The monthly chart suggests we're going to see more upside here, and everything points to a target with a minimum of 4,200 and a maximum around 4,600. Before I sign off tonight, I want to go through the expectations on the market grid. Expectations are for an S2 40.02. The high is expected to be around R1. We've printed not quite up there. We're at 41 so far. That will be a retest of yesterday's high at 40.56. If we get through there, then R2 40.70 is likely to be the extreme. It appears that we're likely to see a little bit of a leaning to the downside based on those hourly charts that I showed you earlier. Let's take a real quick look at the weekly. The expectations here are for an S1 R2. We've already printed R2, by the way. 40.52, 40.56 was Monday's high, so we printed that. The probabilities point to a potential of 40.85, and RXT is 41.15. I don't think we'll see that. The highs that we had a couple months ago was 41.10. That would be a slightly new high. I think there'll be a lot of resistance between 40.85 and 41.15. So I don't expect to see penetrations, at least not this week. So once again, I appreciate everybody's patience with my situation. I'm doing my best to come back. As I mentioned, I'll do a live stream on Wednesday night, and I'll be able to get all the markets. The production time and some other issues are what keeping me from doing these videos like this every night. Hopefully you found this helpful. Have a good day trading, and we'll talk to you tomorrow night.